So our three-part marketing plan included the list builder, the video series, and the third one is the webinars. That's what I'm going to talk to you about here. The webinar by far is our highest converting element of all of the launch components. And it encompasses both the thrill and excitement of a live event, and in addition, it encompasses the highly effective component of being able to deliver that sales message and overcome objections, all wrapped into one experience. So here's the thing with the webinar. What we decided to do was we would structure our webinar content very similar to the content we were actually delivering in the video series. So from a content perspective, it actually wasn't any different. It was shared in a different way, in a different modality, but the content and the lessons essentially were the same thing. And we would structure our webinars so that they were usually delivered at the tail end of a promotion. So if a promotion was ending on a Thursday, for example, we would do the webinar on a Tuesday. And so they were always structured toward the end of the promotion, and they were covering the same content as I mentioned. The difference, though, is that we would structure these webinars in a very condensed way, meaning that people were getting a lot of content in a short period of time, and then we would roll right into the promotion or the pitch of the actual membership. And we would pour the same amount of high energy that we would in a video series into the webinar. And again, the rationale is as straightforward as it comes. The more effort you put into your video series and your webinars, even though you're selling a low-ticket product, the more effective your marketing will be. Most people only put this kind of effort into a promotion for a high-ticket course. Put it into practice for your membership, and you will see thousands and thousands of members sign up. One of my clients, Carrie from the UK, when she first came and started working, we first started working together, she had a membership site that was doing well, had about 1,000 members, but it had flatlined in terms of it had consistently 1,000 members a month, but it was having trouble growing beyond that. And so when we first got together, I said, well, what's your goal for the next 12 months? And she said, I would love to double the membership by the end of the year. I said, great. And so she had it open all the time. We already talked about that. So we switched and we focused on closing it. So that was number one. Then number two was we geared up for her first relaunch of the membership. And we used the components that we're walking through here today. Well, in the span of about 4 months, she not only doubled her membership, but she actually tripled her membership. And she did so by putting the same amount of energy that she would have put into selling a high-ticket course into promoting the membership. So even though it's a low dollar amount, you still want to put the same amount of energy in. Same goes for your video series, same goes for your webinars. So we would spend time, we would create a high quality webinar deck, we would create a workbook that people could download, we would have bonuses that people could get by just attending the webinar. We would have all kinds of incentives for people, contests and so forth. We would create a whole experience around it. The other thing that we would do as it relates to webinars that very few people do, which I think is a big mistake, is we would always have a host for the webinar. Let me ask you this. If you're a speaker and you go out to speak at different events, do you think it's more effective to have somebody introduce you and then come on stage, or just walk right up on stage and just start talking? It's more effective to have somebody introduce you, right? Why? Positioning, authority, and it establishes you as the expert. And it's better for them to say that you're the expert than for you to say, I'm the expert, right? Well, the same principles apply for a webinar. Unfortunately, though, most people just walk right up on stage and just start talking. And they lose out on all the elements that we just talked about. The establishing you as a credibility and authority and the expert. But when somebody else introduces you, whether it be on a live stage or on a webinar, all those things come packaged together. So one of the distinct things that we would do is we would always have somebody host the webinar. And there were a variety of roles that the host would play in terms of the types of things that they would do throughout the webinar. And for one of the optional lessons that I'll have for this module is I'll walk you through the role of the host and the timing of how we structured those particular webinars. Because the good news is I was almost always the host, so I know that role inside and out. And I'll walk you through what I would do as the host, the role that I would play, and the timing of all of the different elements. But the core part of it is this. You've got to have a webinar that moves, meaning you can't be on the same slides for a long period of time. If it was a 60-minute webinar, we would have anywhere between 100 and 140 slides. We were changing the slides all the time. And it doesn't mean every slide has to be elaborate, but it would be an image with a word, or just a main thought. But the key thing is that the webinar was moving. When people are looking at their screen, if it's the same screen for a long period of time, they're moving away. But if it's constantly moving and the energy's high, they're going to be glued to the screen. And that's exactly what would happen with our particular webinars. People were glued to the screen, therefore they were hearing the message, they were following along, and they were getting a ton of value. The other thing that we would do is we would create a workbook that people could use and fill in the blanks. And the purpose of the workbook is best described in how I would share it with the audience. I would say, you're going to go and want to download the workbook, because as you and I both know, by the time this webinar is finished, you'll probably have forgotten half of what was shared. But if you download the workbook and fill in the blanks, you'll be able to remember what you hear again and again and again. And you'll be able to easily refer back to it and get the value from it. So go and download the workbook. And people would. And as a result, people are learning, consuming, getting value, and it's just setting them up for the sale at the end of the membership. And they would typically get so much value from the webinar itself that the offer, by the time that it was made, was just an absolute no-brainer. Especially because, again, it's not a high-ticket item. It's a low-ticket item. Essentially, it's the first month in. And a lot of people ask me, well, Stu, on webinars, do you think it's more effective to sell a year of yearly subscription, like 12 months versus the month? And I would just throw the question back. Do you think, as a consumer, you're more likely to buy a $300 item or a $30 item? Well, the answer is pretty straightforward. If the value is the same, you're much more likely going to immediately jump on it if the price is only 30 bucks or whatever your monthly fee is. So I always like selling the membership from a webinar or in a promotion for the monthly amount. I very rarely ever sell annual from any type of promotions, because I just want to get people in the door. I just want to get them in. And so that's why we structure it that way, where we would have the webinar that would be all this value, and then it would pitch the membership, and the membership would be the monthly fee, not any type of annual fee. So in the optional lesson, I'll walk you through all the timing of the webinars and how we would structure that. I'll also walk you through what the host would say and their roles and responsibilities. But the point is, the webinar was a highly effective item for us, and I highly recommend you do and use it in your marketing plan as well. And if you've never done a webinar, then what I want you to do is I want you to follow along the webinar that I did for this particular promotion. In fact, I'll include it as a bonus for this lesson, is I will give you the exact slides that I used for the webinar for this actual tribe course. So you can see how we got that structured and so forth. But the point is, you got to include a webinar. It is the highest converting component of any launch that you will do. And when you get it right, it is the icing on the cake, meaning you've built up all this momentum and boom, that's the thing that's going to help you close the most amount of members to join your membership. So the three components of any launch: number one, a list builder; number two, the video series; and number three, the webinar. What I want to share with you now is what we would do in the months when we weren't doing a promotion. That is what I'm going to talk about in the next lesson, and you'll see how we're able to maintain our membership during the months when we are not in a promotion. That's coming up in the next lesson. I'll talk to you soon.